What's up, everybody? Today I wanted to do a review of a book that I've actually read before, but just kind of on a whim I decided to reread it because it's been a long time since I've read this book and I wanted to revisit it and see how well it held up. And the book I am talking about today is Twilight Eyes by Dean Koontz. This was the very first Dean Koontz novel that I ever read. I read it, I want to say about 8 years ago now. I believe I was like 20, 21 when I read it, around there. And I remember back when I read this book, I absolutely loved it. It completely captivated me. It shocked me with how good it was. Up to this point, at the time when I first read this book, I didn't really have a lot of experience with adult horror novels. I had read like a couple of Stephen King books. I read, I think, like one Richard Lehman book. I read, I think, just like a few more obscure, lesser known horror novels here and there. I didn't really have a lot of experience with adult horror, and I wasn't at that time in my life reading quite as much. I was kind of in a phase where I wasn't like reading as much as I am now. So at the time when I read this like completely just blew me away. This book surprised me. I had never read anything like this in my life, and it made me fall in love with this author and want to seek out all of his other work. Of course, if you guys have probably seen the older videos on my channel where I did a ranking of like every Koontz book that I've read. And yeah, I've read a ton of his stuff now over the years. And I always remembered this as being like one of my top favorites though. And I decided to give it a reread and see how well it held up. So I just finished rereading this. And I will say that it's not quite the masterpiece that I remembered it to be. This is still a very good book though. Just to give you guys kind of a brief summary of what this one is about, or kind of a recap in case maybe you haven't seen me talking about this in previous videos, or maybe don't know much about this book or this author. This book basically is about our main character named Slim McKenzie, a 17-year-old boy who runs away from home. He is forced to leave his family and run away because he killed his Uncle Denton, who is a goblin in disguise. Our main character, Slim, has this psychic ability called Twilight Eyes, where he is able to see these goblin creatures, as he describes them, disguised as humans. And they are described as like these reptilian, demonic-like creatures that take the form of humans. And they are basically these evil, satanic creatures that take pleasure from killing and torturing other people. And they are just all over, littered and scattered throughout humanity, just wearing these human disguises basically, and no one is aware of it except for Slim, and then maybe a few other characters that he meets along the way that also have some maybe similar abilities that allow them to kind of uncover these disguises as well. So basically Slim is forced to run away from home. He's on the run from the law because they don't know that he killed this goblin creature. They think, he just killed his uncle. So he has to basically go into hiding and leave his family. And he decides to join up with this traveling carnival to gain anonymity and basically to just kind of stay hidden. And he discovers some friends in this carnival. He meets this girl that he falls in love with. And then he also discovers that there are some goblin creatures around this carnival trying to possibly sabotage it. So basically, the whole first half of this book is him living in this carnival, making some new friends, trying to figure out what these goblins are up to. And the first part of this book, for some of you who maybe don't know much about it, was actually written, I believe, in 1985, and it comprises the first like 250 pages. This is like a 450-page book. And then Dean Koontz didn't write the second part of this book until a couple of years later. I believe it came out in 1987. And I actually really like the first part of this book. I think it's a little bit better, a little bit more well written than the second part. And I think the first part is kind of sufficient as like its own story. I do like the second part too, don't get me wrong, but it feels like more of like a part two, more of like a continuation. It doesn't feel like it's completely necessary to have it together. It almost feels like more of just like a sequel kind of tacked on there. And then that part two comprises of the last 200 pages, to where Slim McKenzie and so along with these other characters that he meets, one of them specifically, he decides to leave the carnival and go on this long journey, this long mission to basically hunt down these goblins and try to stop them from this sort of evil plan that they are trying to destroy the world, kind of. I'm kind of remaining vague here. I don't want to get into too much detail about the plot. I won't really say much more. I don't want to give anything away. But yeah, that's the gist of Twilight Eyes. It's basically about Slim Mackenzie fighting off these evil, demonic-like creatures that are disguised as humans. And of course, with his ability called Twilight Eyes, he is one of very few people in the story that he can like see past these disguises to like the creature, the beast within. And yeah, that's basically what this is about. And again, I did not quite love this as much as I remembered. It's not quite the masterpiece. It failed to really just like capture my imagination this time around. I think because I've had so much experience over the last several years, and I've read so many other books by Koontz and so many other books by other authors, that this time around it just didn't really, knock it out of the park for me. But it was still a very good book. I still enjoyed it. I did notice some more flaws with it here and there this time around. I think Koontz's prose is a little bit overblown. At times, he has a tendency to have like a little bit of that purple prose, you might say, where it just feels a little bit overwritten, and he's trying to be a little bit fancy and kind of poetic with some of his writing, especially in the first half. Even though I did say the first half I liked more, I think the second half is focused more on the action of the characters and has a little bit less description to it. So in that sense, I guess the second part feels a little bit leaner and tighter, I guess. But yeah, overall, I give this book a solid 4 out of 5 stars. I dropped it from a 5-star rating to a 4-star upon reread. And I might revisit some other Koontz books in the future. My favorite Koontz book in particular is Intensity. I will definitely be rereading that one again sometime in the future. Maybe even more than once. And I don't think that one will fall off for me at all. That was one of the last Dean Koontz novels that I read. It wasn't even that long ago. I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago or something, or not even that long. And that book is definitely Koontz's best. And I also do have a couple of other Koontz books that I have not read yet, which I may talk about in a separate video if I end up reading them sometime soon. But yeah, that is my review, I guess you could say, for Twilight Eyes. This is a pretty good book. I would recommend checking this one out if you're a fan of carnival horror, or if the premise sounds like it might be interesting to you. I would maybe give this one a read. This is definitely one of his better, if not one of his best books. But yeah, it's not quite perfect. I just didn't really love it this time around. But it's still pretty good. So yeah, that's my review for Twilight Eyes. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you've read this one, let me know what your thoughts are on it down in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.